Are you prepared to transform your well-being? I'm Sanjay Raja. My mission is to challenge our perspectives on food, fitness, and overall health. I own a successful nutrition and fitness business based in Orlando, Florida. And through this experience, I've learned that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. From creating delicious and healthy recipes, to training elite athletes, and even writing the book, The Food Talk. I've accumulated a wealth of knowledge, but here's the exciting part. There's always more to discover. That's why I'm embarking on a journey to connect with leading experts, unveiling the secrets to a happier, healthier life. Together, let's explore innovative ways to enhance our well-being. This is Recipe for Wellness. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of our podcast, Recipe for Wellness, based off our TV show. You know, I developed a joy for cooking, and I think that hopefully comes out on screen when we show our show. That being said, what I'd like to do is bring on a special guest that I met in New York City. My executive producer, Melanie, she reached out to this individual, and we see today there's so many celebrity chefs out there, right? We see all this, Gordon Ramsay's of the world. We see all this, and we look at what they do, and we're in awe. I'm certainly in awe because I think being a chef is being an artist. And so without further ado, what I want to do is bring on Chef Sandoval, Richard Sandoval. I met him in New York City, met his wonderful son, learned a little bit about his business, and I was taken aback by the legacy he has created. So, Chef, how are we doing today?
Great. Thank you for inviting me to your podcast.
Absolutely. We've been traveling around the world, season 1, season 2, and we met so many interesting people. And we met a lot of chefs along the way. And what I love is the backstory about how you got into the field. Right? So share it with our audience, because everybody loves the origin story, much like a superhero who has an origin story. We want to talk to our guests and see what their origin story is, because our guests on our show are a combination of people who are coaches, healers, authors, lecturers. But being a chef is such a unique and amazing skill. Tell us how you got involved into following this passion of yours that's turned into this huge empire.
Right. So early on in my life, it was about, my parents were divorced, and I grew up in my grandmother's house, right? In Latin culture, everything, like most cultures, food really defines who we are, right? It tells a big story about, who we are. And in Latin America, in my grandma's house, everything was around food. Every Saturday, Sunday, great big family reunions. She was the matriarch of the family. She'd sit at a table with 20 people. Cooks would bring food to the table. She'd plate and pass, and that was already migrating to the kitchen at that young age. Her cooks, her people at the house would lift me up, put me in the kitchen counter, and I watch them cook, right? And so I would always watch them taste food, and so they asked me, what did you learn from your grandmother? Obviously, these generational recipes that I learned from her. Mm-hmm. But I think the most interesting thing, and I think which has helped me be successful, is, they taste all the food as they're cooking it, right? I think as chefs, sometimes we forget to taste the most important thing. People grab a recipe, they make it, and they think, well, there you go, it's the recipe, right? But ingredients change, temperatures change ingredients. So, the biggest thing that she taught me was that is taste. So now I tell everybody, a recipe is a guideline, but also, own it, right? Take your own approach to it and be tasting as you're cooking it along. So anyway, at that young age, I was learning about food, not really thinking that's what I wanted to do, because I really wanted to be a professional tennis player, right?
There you go.
That was my true calling, my thought.
There you go.
And so, but again, at that young age, I was already, learning about food. Fast forward, after playing the circuit, playing collegiate, I decided that, I was not going to make, a real living out of this unless I went to teach tennis, and I don't have the patience to teach, right? I have, as I told you, I have 2 gears. drive or park. I don't have anything in the middle.
Well,
So
we
I
share
said,
that in common. We
yeah.
definitely share that in common.
So I
And
said,
I'll tell you what you said there is really interesting because this is when I'm cooking for my kids or cooking for family, which I love to do. I look at the recipe as a guide and nothing more. Just get the bones of it. And then I always tell my kids, make it your own. Good, bad, or indifferent. Guess what? You're the artist. Try something new and see what happens. Right?
100%. As I like to say, like books, you don't like plagiarism. You don't want people to take a recipe from a
Hmm.
restaurant and say, "Oh, now I own it." But no, take the idea and then own it, right? And then make it
Yes.
your own. I think that's important.
Yeah. So, we had the pleasure of filming at your location, Ton in New York City. Such a great time. Can't thank you enough. Your staff, your team, and the food was just fantastic for our ending dinner for that trip. But what I loved about that was really getting to know your son. I loved about that
Thank
trip,
you.
which is he's a budding chef. He's learning from the master here, and it must fill you with a sense of pride to know that your kids want to carry on this legacy of yours. Your son being in the kitchen, your daughter running the business operation. Was this something in your mind, if you had to share this secret that they don't know, is it always something in the back of your mind you wanted them to do it, or did it just happen naturally, or did you kind of push them into that direction? How'd you get them
Good question. But
there?
for me, it was a catch-22 because I always told them, please don't do this, right? The restaurant industry is very difficult, long
Mm,
hours. But in the back of my mind, I was saying, God, I hope they don't listen to me. I really do hope they come do this, even though I was pushing them away at the same time, right?
yeah, yeah.
And so, they both decided that because they traveled the world with me, I have restaurants all over the
Hmm.
world, and all they would really
Yeah.
get to see was, the grand openings, the parties, the people, the
Hmm.
photographs, the book signings, and they thought that's what the restaurant business was all about. And me, knowing that's not the truth, right? That's the front end, but on the back end, there's so much work that goes into running a restaurant that a lot of people don't know. It's to me, it's like running an orchestra. There's so many moving parts in a restaurant, right? And
Yeah.
it's all with human touch, and then humans are complicated, right? So not only are you training humans to run your restaurant with all the different parts, whether hostess, bartender, barback, cook, salad cook, grill cook, and everything has to come out in a planned way, like an orchestra.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so now that so I told them I really didn't want to do that because it was so complicated, but they only saw the beauty of it. So they decided, we want to do what you do, Dad. And so inside of me, I was like, okay, great, Dad, I like it, but I wish they look at something else also. So fast forward now. Isabella goes to Cornell to study, operations. Giancarlo goes to the Culinary Institute of America to study culinary. So I said, great. Richard Sandoval will be split into two parts now because I do everything. I wear all these hats, right? I'm a
Yes.
designer, I'm a cook,
Absolutely.
I'm a chef, I'm a human resource,
Absolutely.
everything. So I said they can divide the company, divide and conquer, and then each one's operations, one's culinary. And so a year ago, they both come on board, or 2 years ago, and it was like deer, hit with with
In the headlights. Yeah.
with headlights. They were, oh Jesus, this is not what we imagined. As a matter of fact, my daughter left after the 6 months she opened town. She's I got to take a sabbatical. She was
Oh,
so
wow.
stressed out, so nervous.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so it's been a challenging time. It's a lot more difficult than what I thought it was. Because also, I mean, I'm not only just worrying about the business, but now I have my two kids that, I'm this helicopter
Hmm.
dad that's always hovering up, next to him. And so yeah, so it's been challenging for sure, but I think it's been great.
Well, I can relate to this because I've been an entrepreneur for so long, and we started the production company, we started the show. So season one, my kids were in the show, and my daughter's co-hosting with me because she's got that personality. My son didn't really want to be on camera, but he was curious, and they
Right.
thought it was a cool experience. And we travel everywhere. And then for season two, we started on Bali. So I took them with me to Bali. They made a little appearance on camera. But then after that trip and that episode, they said, Dad, we really don't want to do this. I said, okay, that's all right. I just wanted to show it to you. They see the shiny toy, like They see all the perks and the glamour, they see all that, but they don't realize how much it takes to get to that point, right? So I know you can relate to that, and I'm sure your kids had a kind of a welcome party into this is my world, okay? So that being said, I totally relate to it. Totally get it. So now that you've got your son running the kitchen there,
Right.
And your daughter who's going to be running the business operations, right?
Correct.
This is something I find really difficult for myself, which is being an A-type personality. I'm a bit of a control freak, right? And I know how I do things. I do them a certain way, and they get results. So I go with that. So how is it for you to be able to go, okay, I'm going to hand over the reins here. I'm going to watch it, but how hard is it for you not to jump in and go, okay, come on, let's do it this way, right? How hard is that for you?
It's impossible. Like you, I'm an A1 personality, right? I'm a control freak. I control everything. I need to touch everything, to see
Yeah.
everything. But
Yeah.
I think, and the biggest and the hardest thing is, it's generational. These new generations have a different perspective in
Hmm.
the world, right? How,
Yes.
this work balance is a thing, right? That,
Hmm.
that has to happen. So yeah, so, I think also, with new ideas culinarily, yeah, I mean, I'm an older generation, but I thought, I evolved pretty well because I'm an, evolutionary, where I always think needs to evolutionize to continue. We've seen companies like Kodak and, phone companies,
Yes.
BlackBerry, that have disappeared because they did not evolve. They stayed behind, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I've always been a believer in evolution and continue to evolve your businesses. And also, it's hard, with your kids coming on board, and culinarily wise, with Giancarlo, or I want to go this direction, and obviously, you got to give them creativity space, but at the
Hmm.
same time, people come to Richard Sandoval restaurant because they know what they're going to expect, right? Boldness,
Yes.
flavors, and everything. So you
Yes.
can't just all of a sudden let go of the hands free and say, oh yeah, whatever, let's do a 360 in this direction. So it's
Yeah.
impossible not to jump in, right? And so it's kind of a balancing act, right? How much do you let them in, to have their own creativity show? How much do you hold them back? It's also a learning process, right? I didn't get to where I am, and I made a lot of mistakes, and unfortunately,
Yeah.
people want to fall. People don't listen to you, right? People need to fall and see, this
Yes.
is how it happens because that's how the brain works, right? Oh, this
Yes.
guy's telling me not to do this, but it's called experience, right? Experience. How do you get experience? Is by making mistakes and not making them
Yep.
again. So I'm
Yeah.
just trying to help him, right? And I've seen that movie before. I know how it ends. I'm just trying to help you. So yeah,
Well,
so it's
failure is
very
a better
hard.
teacher than success, right? It teaches us, and then it's about how you get back up again, that resiliency to do things better, evolve, grow, and then take it to the next step.
Exactly.
So, with that being said, let's talk about this is something I've been so curious about since we met, which is, we're in some troubled times economically in this country and around the world. You lived through COVID. I lived through COVID. I had to pivot. I had to shut down a lot of the stuff I was doing, being an actor, speaker. That was going away. I had to take everything online with being a trainer. So everything had to evolve. Now, the restaurant industry, the facts better than I do, is notorious, meaning within the first, what is the stat? I think it's like the first, what, year, 2 years,
Here.
3 years, most restaurants close. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's like 70% of restaurants close within the first year of operations.
Right. So here you are. You
Right.
navigated the 2008 crash. You navigated COVID. We're in this economic time right now, which is not great. So here you are thriving. And how did you do it? Because that's really going to be impactful to our audience because we have a lot of restaurateurs, we have a lot of chefs who listen to the podcast and our show. How were you able to keep your mission on point, keeping your flavors and everything that you're known for going so that people keep coming back? How do you navigate those turbulent times, especially now through COVID? How did you do that?
I always bring this up, as a chef, as you said earlier, we're entrepreneurs, we're artists, right? We love to create, right? And unfortunately, most chefs never learn the business side of it, right?
Mm,
And in any business, at the end of the day, if it's not successful and you don't make money, nobody's going to care because you're not going to be in
right.
business much longer, right? I was
Right.
very fortunate when I went, after culinary school, I went back to Mexico, and my dad was, he was a restaurateur, but he was not a chef, he was a businessman, right? And he
Hmm.
taught me the business side of the business, right? So going into this, when I did my first restaurant, I already knew, I needed financial statements. I needed to plan. I needed cash flows. I needed to look at
Hmm.
balance sheets. I needed to look at all these things to understand my business. So again, when 2009 hit, the greatest depression that we've seen in many years, a lot of places closed. I was able to stay in business. I was able to plan. I was able to sit down,
Mm.
look at my financials, look at results, and plan, right? And cut and make adjustments. As you said,
So
pivot.
how many restaurants did you have at the time when 2008 hit?
In 2008, I probably had about, I would say maybe 7 or 8.
7 or 8. Wow. Okay.
Yes,
That's
most,
amazing.
yeah, and so most of the, yeah, so I was able to stay in business and then thrive again. But I was planning, right? And then, as you said, then COVID hits, and like you, I shut down everything. I mean, the
Hmm.
faucets were clean. There was not even a dripping of money coming
Yeah.
through. Nothing. I
Yeah.
furloughed everybody, closed every single restaurant. All my fees stopped. Everything stopped. Right.
Yeah.
So again, like I needed to, to pivot, and I actually opened 2 restaurants during COVID, which I think I was the only chef in the world that did that. But again,
Wow.
it comes
Yeah.
back to planning and understanding, right? I had two restaurants that were in the middle, almost finished when COVID hit, and as COVID, during the middle of COVID, or towards coming to an end, in my mind, I said, well, no one's going to open, no one's crazy enough to open a restaurant right now, right? But what the
Hmm.
restaurants that have patios are able to open because you're outdoors. So these 2 restaurants had huge patios, and I said, well, everybody's tired of being indoors, being at home, and so people want to write about new things because no one's writing, everybody's indoors. And I said, what a good time. If I open, everyone's going to write about it because they think I'm crazy, right? Everyone that's at home that can go out to restaurants going to go out. So I opened and I started thriving. But again, there was an analysis, based on my decisions. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I mean, I like to say I like to plan. I understand, the nature of the business. I understand the beast. And most people don't take the time to really understand that. They think if you're full, if there's money coming in, you're golden. No, that
Yeah.
is not true at all.
Yeah. Well, you think about this, and I think this might be a great talking point right now for our audience, which is we've been talking about for season 2, our theme is farm to table, which
Right.
is how do the food culture in the United States get back to that? Because we've been traveling to Costa Rica, Bali, we were in Baja, Mexico, and guess what? We had really delicious food that was simple, but it was farm to table every single time. And it was cost effective, it was affordable, and people eat like this on a daily basis out there. We are one of the most prosperous countries in the world, and we've completely lost that, right? And so when we were eating at your restaurant, I got that same feeling again of farm to table, which was awesome. And that's what we really want to push with the show is how do we get back to that? So, especially with food costs being so high right now, inflation's crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
you talk about you have to supply your restaurants with premium ingredients. How have you been able to create that feeling of farm to table? I've been to one of your restaurants and I hope to try more, but how do you guys do that, especially in this kind of environment right now?
Right. And for me, it was always important. And I kind of learned this as I was navigating my expansion and going to Dubai, going
Hmm.
to Hong Kong, going to Europe, where there wasn't many ingredients from my country, right? Or
Yeah.
very similar. And so at that time, I looked at it and I said, again, to your point that, yeah, you can just fly everything from Mexico, from the US has everything, but the blueprint, of the, the planes. So everything that we do, I think has to have a purpose now,
Yeah.
and if we think about it, and just me making that simple decision of not flying everything, it's a little grain of salt. If we all do it, and when that cuts down
Hmm.
the effect on the earth from all these planes, from all the gas. I mean, it's a huge problem, right? And so what I did is I drew a map and I said, okay, so I can't get this, but India's close to Dubai, right? And they have
Mm,
chilies and they have a lot of spices. So let me see what they have that has a similar flavor profile to what I have, and then I can bring it in,
nice.
and I can bring it in from India. I don't have to go to Mexico, to Latin America, which is much farther. So I've always had an interest in going local, going sustainable.
Yes.
'Cause
Yes.
I think it's huge, because otherwise we're not going to have fish. We're going to
Yeah.
deplete everything that we have. I mean, the bees, I have that Viva Abejas campaign that I started. The habitats are dwindling. So all these things are happening that, someone's knocking on our door and saying, guys, you guys are ruining the world. It's time that,
Yeah.
you leaders in the industry, you, myself, and other chefs, take call to action, right? And look at what's
Yeah.
happening. And if we all unify and do it together, it'll happen. But most people say, oh, just me by myself, I can't. No, it's not you by yourself. It's us united, right? So doing all
Yes.
these things and being really, conscious and intentional, we will be able to get people going back to farm and table. We are already seeing a 20% decrease in drinking around the globe. So what
Hmm.
you're doing, wellness is not just a word anymore; it's a thing. People are
Yes.
really worried about wellness. Me myself, I'm 58. I don't drink anymore. I don't smoke. I go to the gym. I don't eat
Hmm.
meats anymore. So there's all these things that I'm doing, and I feel a lot better, right? So
Yeah.
I think if people like myself can kind of, be intentional and be an example for people, I think we can get back to that. And you're 100% right. I love going to Bali. I feel good in Bali, right?
Hmm.
Because you just feel like it's authentic. It's everything's coming from a farm or from somewhere. It's not in a bag, and it has all these preservatives and all this stuff that your body cannot digest.
Yeah, I keep telling the story. I was in India in January 2025 visiting family, but before that, me and the kids, we went to the Himalayas. Always wanted to see it. And I ate rice and bread all day, didn't gain a pound. Felt fantastic. It was awesome. I come here, I will never do that. I can't do that. I gain weight, I feel lethargic, I feel all these things. So I just it shocks me that it's one of our God-given rights to basically have quality food that's grown on this planet that doesn't make it to the table because we process it, we repackage it, we create food to extend shelf life, which is the trend I've noticed here. That's what we're doing with bread, with everything. And I'm sitting down at your table at your restaurant, and I just feel like, wow, I feel like I'm at home because it's like this is stuff that I would make if I knew how to make this stuff. And it just feels quality. You feel good. You don't feel lethargic. You just feel really, really good about yourself. So one of the themes of the show is that taking care of your health before it goes downhill. That's when most people address their health is when it starts going downhill. Then they start taking care of it, right? So it's just being proactive, not reactive. And we always talk about food as medicine, not just as fuel, but using it as medicine. So the menu items, some of which I'll share with the audience that we had was amazing. It was like a short rib that tasted amazing. That ceviche made in coconut milk. One of a kind, by the way, chef. That was
Thank
fantastic.
you.
I love that. I really, really love that. But what goes into planning your menu outside of bringing your own culture into it, making sure that you share your culture with your patrons? Does health and wellness play a big part into your menu and development of that menu?
Yes, 100%. As I said earlier, and there's that saying, you spend your life making money, and then you spend your money saving your life, right?
Hmm.
So to
Yeah.
your point, if you're, not reactive but proactive, at a
Hmm.
younger age, you're going to live longer, healthier. And so as I started taking care of myself, I started planning in my menus again to use, as much farm to table as I can, as much local as I can, take, the
Yeah.
preservatives away, because our systems were not built for that, right? Whoever
That's
built
right.
us, or where they made us with, we're not a machine, so, we were made to eat vegetables, fish, poultry, that our systems, without all these antibiotics and all these things, to be able
Hmm.
to digest it all. And what's happened, as populations have grown, and we have to have, larger cell lives and all that, they start adding all these things that our systems, our livers, our pancreas, they cannot cope with it. And
Yeah.
It's affecting your life, your sleep, and you need sleep to reproduce. That's how your organs get fixed. But if you're eating these bad meals, all these things that your body can't digest, it's the domino effect. One thing leads to another, and then your quality of life is going to suffer. You're not going to have wellness.
So you have a great pulse of the industry, and what I'm seeing right now is especially like it's blown up in Florida in the best way, and I'm seeing it across the country too, which is organic meal, farm to table meal prep services rather than a traditional restaurant. I'm seeing that a lot happen right now, where we actually did an episode in Tampa with a company that does meal prep services for people who can't meal prep. We're a big advocate for meal prepping, saves money, time, and you know what you're going to get. Are you seeing a little bit of that trend on your side where meal prep, because on a national level, you got the big companies. I'm not going to name them, but they've reached out. They said, "Hey, can you try our meal prep services?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Why not?" Because whatever nutritional value you guys claim to have, you lose it because you're packaging everything in salt. So what's the point?
Right.
What are we doing? Right. And it costs so much money, small, tiny portions. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't teach you how to do this on your own. Right.
Correct.
You become dependent on it. Right. So from your experience, we're noticing a return, a slow but gradual return from farm to table experience. Restaurants are doing this better, which is great. Yours was a classic example of that. But are you seeing meal prep services kind of make a splash in your industry? Because I'm seeing more of that right now.
Yeah, I think you said, some big companies came up with these things, these programs where, they would send you prepackaged ingredients with the recipe. So it kind of make you feel like a chef. Made it feel
Yeah.
a little healthier. But again, when they grow so fast, corporations need to cut costs and all these things. And all of a sudden, what started as a great thing is not so great anymore, right?
Exactly.
They have all these hidden, things that they have to use. But yeah, I'm seeing smaller, groups here, and I know a woman in New Jersey that does that for families, right? She has her company, and she gives you a menu for the week, and then she preps it for you, sends it out, and then she's a nutritionist, so it's healthy. She kind of sits down and talks to you about lower salt, lowering sugars, and all these things. So she actually preps these meals, catering to better your health. So yeah, I am. She started. She's doing really well, and yeah, I mean, I've seen other people that are actually doing that, and I think it's good. And I think these newer generations are looking at that because they're not going to fine dining restaurants that much anymore, right?
They're not.
I think they're getting together in homes and using some of these services.
Yeah, absolutely. When I first started my company, which is a nutrition fitness company, I let my team run it now. But when I first started, I used to be a personal chef to a lot of doctors. I would go to their homes. I would cook all these meals for them, meal prep it out for the week, and they love that. They just absolutely love the fact they didn't have to think about it. Right?
Yeah, agreed.
Right. So that being said, let's talk about this, which is you've got so many amazing things going on, and it's hard to keep track of you. Right? It's hard to keep track of where you're going to go, what you're going to do. And I think it's a great thing for you. So I'm so happy for your success. It's all well deserved.
Thank
but
you.
Let's talk about this, which is you are passionate about a number of different things that you and I have shared offline together. So you mentioned it briefly today, which was conservation of bees.
Right.
I think this is a huge, huge topic that I'm glad you're getting in front of. How has that message? So give our audience a little bit of background about that. And how has that been received within your community? Are people coming in to help you with this? What's going on with that?
Yes. So yes, but I think during COVID, I think it was like 80% of the bees' habitats were destroyed. Right? They were dwindling. They were losing their habitat. Not many people know that. I think it's 3 out of every 5 bites of food that we eat. Are done through pollination. So you need these pollinizers. Which bees are some of the biggest ones. For our food cycle. So I said, I'm a chef. I work with food. I need food to live. I need food to keep my company going. So I think as a leader, I said I need to be proactive and do something. At least create awareness, right?
Yes.
So little by little, we wrote first. We wrote a children's book called Viva Abejas, Long Live the Bees, right? I've always felt education is probably the most important factor to be able to change, whether it's a culture or country or something. It all starts with the younger generations through education, right? If they can
Yeah.
understand why it happens, the whys, then they would be more interested in it. So we started doing a lot of book readings, the Ronald McDonald House, hospitals, preschools,
Hmm.
and it was amazing. I was blown away by how these kids would come to these, or I would go to do the book reading. Sometimes we take them to the Four Seasons, to give them tours to the kitchen. Then we sit them outside. I'd read the book and talk about the bees. And it's funny, all kids thought that bees are bad, that you have to kill them when you see them because they're by the pool, they're going to sting you, and it's a bad thing. So they,
Yeah.
so right there, I mean, that's not good because they don't think, they don't know the real story behind bees.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yes.
so I felt if I did something like with this book, and then we have also partnerships with some of the hotels where beekeepers bring beehives to the hotel,
Yeah.
and the guests can kind of go there, read about them, understand, look at them. Then we have the byproducts, the honey, the wax, and do certain things. And then I think it has
Hmm.
created awareness. We partnered up with some liquor companies. We went to Merida, I think last year, and partnered up with Aquafinca, because they have all these orange groves that, depend on pollination. So we put some of our beehives in their big orange groves, and yeah, and so yeah, it's thriving and it's doing all these things, but more than anything, being proactive and create awareness so that people knows it is a problem, right?
Yeah. So what we're going to make sure and do is we'll put some information about
Great,
that on our site
awesome,
for our audience and our podcast audience as well. So that's one of many passion projects you have. It's so hard to keep track, and I love the fact you're so diverse. I got a sneak peek at one of the other passion projects that you have, and without giving it away, but it is about how you are passing the flame to your children, right? And we talked a little bit about that. What came about? What was the inspiration to shoot that little video and see where it goes as far as passing the torch to the next generation and giving the world a sneak peek into your life? What was the inspiration behind doing all that?
right. So yeah, so as I'm going to be 60. I want to retire by the time I was 65. And so I think as you grow older, and people will know, you begin to you know to look at all the things you've done, and how do you pass your legacy on, how do you keep whatever
Hmm.
you started alive. And so I did two things, as you said, one was, kind of in a program, I'm passing, the legacy, of the business to my kids. And I think, as I'm looking, living what I call unlimited time now, because before we keep kicking the bucket down the road, right? You never think you're going to be 60. I never
Yeah.
imagined 60 was going to get close, and now it's 2 years away. And so all these
Yeah.
things start to hit you, right? Your legacy, your limited
Yeah.
time, there's things you want to do. So yeah, so I said, so how do I start to download all the information I have? I have 30
Hmm.
years of experience, like you said, going through the greatest depression, the 2009 financial crisis,
Hmm.
through COVID. So all these things that I've learned, I don't want to just die with them in my mind, So again, for me, it's about how do I pass all this information on? So I figured, one would be through my kids and through, doing the program. But the other is, I
Hmm.
started a cohort program called, Old Ways, New Hands. Old
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so old ways, new hands was kind of my mantra when I first started. And it was, my generational recipes that I grew up eating at my grandmother's house in my new hand, new techniques that I learned in school, and that was part of evolutionizing, Mexican food, to being a lighter, raising the bar. So it was authentic, but modern. And so that was old ways, new hands. As I get older now, it's newer hands, which are the younger generation, and my old hands, passing the information. So it's funny. I never thought about it, but it became full circle, right? So now, yeah.
Yes.
So now it's all about passing and helping the newer generations. And especially I think we're going through some difficult times right now in the country, with all these things happening, and so I thought it was a perfect time to put again my little grain of thought to help unify us, unite us, the Latin, the community. I mean, this country is made up of immigrants, right? We're all
Yeah.
immigrants to a certain extent. So yeah, so again, this is all yeah, how to pass on my legacy, help newer generations, keep opening doors, and then I can run off onto the sunshine, and sunset and be happy.
But here's the thing. I don't think knowing you the way I know you in the limited amount of time, but I think we get along really well, is that I don't think you'll ever stop working, right?
No, I know. But I
You
think
know,
there's a difference, sorry to interrupt you, between stopping and pulling it
mhm.
back a little bit, right?
True.
And I think, I think we all at some point need to, do what we love to do, keep doing it, but get away from the minutia of the day to day. The chef didn't show
Yes.
up, the cook's not coming. So I think that's the difference. I'll still be up here, but just kind of, from the sidelines a little bit.
Yeah, I need to learn how to do that myself, honestly. So,
You're too young still.
well, I'm going to be 50 next year, so I'm hitting a milestone myself. So, yeah. So here's what I
Sorry to
think.
interrupt, but remember what they said. When you hit 50, the 50,000-mile guarantee expires, right? So you got to take
That's
even more
true.
care of yourself.
That's true. Well, the funny thing is, though, I always tell people this, and that is I feel better at 49, which I'm at right now, than when I was 29. You know why? It's the stuff you didn't know or you took for
Right.
granted. You think you're invincible, right? So active recovery, working out, eating right, eating clean is just a normal part of my life. But in anticipation of this interview, I asked our audience to send in some responses to questions I sent out.
Okay.
And so here are some of the questions we wanted to ask you from the audience,
Great.
which is number one, you see on TV Gordon Ramsay yelling and screaming and doing all that. Was that your experience when you were coming up as a chef? Is that real?
It is a real thing, but it has changed, very, very, very much. I mean, I think the days of the screaming in the kitchen, had to be
Hmm.
toned down. So that was like a European kind of militarized, kitchens where everything was just very, very focused. I think in today's world, there's other ways to help people understand,
Yeah.
make them passionate. But it was a thing. I think now you don't see it nearly as much.
Okay. Okay. Because that's what you see on TV with Hell's Kitchen and all this stuff. He's yelling, he's screaming, he's doing all these things. It makes for great TV. But you think
Right.
to yourself, going, is that what it's really like?
I mean,
So
and let me rephrase. I mean, you still see some of that in the kitchen because you got to remember when you're in the kitchen, it's a short period of time of 3 to 4 hours when everybody's coming in. There's tickets everywhere. It's hot
mhm.
in there. So yeah, so temperaments, boil, and you'll see
Yeah.
some plates flying, some glasses, but not as much as it is, televised or make for good TV, right? But you do see some of that. I will have to say.
Okay. So two, the second most popular question is what does chef eat at home? It's like, you own a pizza joint, right? You're not going to eat pizza every day because you're kind of sick of it, right? So what does a chef who's highly trained, knows how to make just about anything on the planet, what does he eat at home?
Exactly as you say. I mean, if you work in a pizzeria, you're not going to go home and eat pizza, right? That's the last thing you want to see. And for me, as we talked earlier, with the a personality, everything, people would not believe this, but every new dish still goes through my palate, right?
Hmm.
And Latin food, like Indian food, is very flavorful, very bold, a lot of
Yeah.
ingredients. So when I go home, I built a nice outdoor kitchen with a nice grill, and so I like
Yeah.
to really simplify. And I also, I think, now I just like great products, some nice oils, almost like the Mediterranean diet, right? And just,
Hmm.
good protein, simple grilled herbs, not very spicy,
Okay.
but just a little milder, healthier, and just very light,
Okay. So I was in Costa Rica before we saw you.
right?
And I don't know if you've seen the video online, made the rounds, but what happened is my EP and I were at the airport, and then there was a guy who is selling hot sauce. And she's like, "You got to go challenge this because I'm notorious. You can't find anything that's hot enough for me. Just can't. I was born without that gene that tastes hot food. I can just eat anything." So we
Right.
go up there, and we end up. The guy's like, "Are you want to try?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And I said, "What's the hottest thing you got?" And he warned me like 3 times. I was like, "You don't know who you're dealing with here, dude. So let's go." And so I ate this thing, felt nothing, and it's on camera. And he shakes my hand, says, "You're the champion." It was like ghost pepper. It was Carolina Reaper, all this
Wow.
stuff. Now, I know the Latin culture and the Indian culture share heritage of spicy food. So
Correct.
do you feel heat? Do you like, are things too spicy for you? Or are you like me, which is impervious to all heat?
Right. I always like to say, because I use chilies different than most people in the sense that I look as a chili as an herb, right?
Mm,
And because most people just want that fire, and I believe that if you do that for most people, like you and me, I think like you said, we either don't have the gene or we've developed a tolerance because we've been eating all our lives. So our
yeah.
tolerance is much higher than most people, right?
Yeah.
So what's a 10 for me for most people is probably like a 20, right? It's just
Yes.
like they can't live with it. So yeah, so I've learned to tone it down. I mean, I do have I love chilies on everything, right? Even when I eat simple
Yes.
food, I'm grilling, I'll rub I'll grab some serrano and just rub it on my protein
Yeah.
to get some, to get
Absolutely.
a little bit of heat. But I think chilies are better enjoyed, on its different guises, right? Sometimes you're moving some of the seeds, the veins to get the habanero taste, but not
Right.
the tanned heat. So I think it's cool to play around with them to get the
Yes.
end result, and also more than anything to keep you within the tolerance level that you can manage.
Yeah, I think my daughter inherited this from me because she eats chilies and peppers like it's going out of style, which is crazy. But it's all good. So the third most
Life without a chili is not life.
exactly, it's boring. It's really boring. So here's the third most popular question from our audience, from the TV side and the podcast side, which is there's a I'm an actor. I've got my SAG card. I've been TV and film. So you as a chef, I'm sure have watched a lot of movies and TV shows. What is the most accurate depiction of life as a chef? If you had to name one movie and a TV show.
I mean, I think the bear.
Yes, I've
I
heard
think
really good things about that. I haven't seen it yet, honestly.
yeah, I think that really portrays the life in the restaurant industry, right? I think it portrays it really well. And
Hmm.
I mean, the movie, I mean, there was that one about actually that Indian chef, right? And I can't remember the name of it, but his family, I think they moved to Europe, and he's very passionate of food, and he's able to build a restaurant and really kind of go to a place where people didn't like spicy food and didn't like spice. I don't know if it was Holland or somewhere, but he's able
Okay.
to bring people together through his restaurant, and get them to really enjoy all this Indian food that was very different to what they were used to. And it's kind of my story. When I started in New York 30 years ago with Maya, Mexican food was seen from a very different lens than it is today,
Yes.
right? And so
Yes.
my goal was that, is to introduce people to the really authentic Mexican food. Not that Tex-Mex is not authentic, but it's different. It's not what I was used to in Mexico. So now I think they can make the separation and say, well, Tex-Mex is one thing, and then authentic Mexican is another. So yeah, so I really enjoyed that movie about this Indian gentleman
I'm
being a
I'm gonna
chef.
have to look up. I'm gonna
Yeah,
look that up and
yeah,
check
yeah.
that one out. Now, here's a personal question from me, which is I'm a big fan. Part of our inspiration of our show comes from many places, but
Right.
we always love the bizarre foods guy, right? That guy Andrew Zimmern. He had his show on TV forever, and he went to Oaxaca. He went to all these places in Mexico. Is it true, because from your experience, that so chapulines, for those people who don't know what chapulines are essentially
Grasshopper.
grasshoppers.
Yep.
Yeah. I've had them. I think they are fantastic. They taste like peanuts. Is it true that's part of that staple of that diet? Number one, out there. Number two, is that something you would incorporate into your restaurants for people to try a new protein source? Would you ever do that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and it is true. I mean, in Mesoamerica, times the Mayans and all that. I mean, they ate ants, they ate
Yeah.
all the different insects, right? And like you said, I mean, they taste like popcorn. Like everybody, I mean, popcorn. It tastes like peanuts or it tastes like chicken, right?
Yeah.
They don't know what it tastes like. That's what it tastes like. So yeah, I mean, it's a texture thing. And I have implemented like chapulines is very common with guacamole, right?
Yes.
Because it gives a little crunch, a little
Yeah.
little extra
Yeah.
saltiness. The problem is that most people don't buy it. I mean, I don't think we sold one a week, right? And we're a pretty busy
Right.
restaurant. But I think people tend
Yeah.
to shy away from those things. I think it's more of a cultural thing. If you grew
Mm.
in that culture, eating it, escamoles, which is the escamoles that grow in the
Yes.
maguey, that are delicious
The
with
ant larvae.
tortillas.
The ant
At
larvae.
larvae, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So there's all these things that are really, really good. but I think it's a cultural thing. If you grew around it, you grew up, you'll taste it. But if someone, you know,
Yes.
you come to us and say, "You want a grasshopper?" Most people are going to say, "No, thank you."
But see, you know what the funny thing is, I tell people, you know, I try to push people past their boundaries with the show, and I tell
Right,
people, insects will taste whatever marinades or coatings or whatever you put into it. That's what they taste like.
correct,
They absorb all the
correct.
flavor, which is
Yeah,
pretty amazing, right? They're a cheap source of protein, and they're
very high in
almost
protein.
90% protein. You know, there's no wasted energy with them, you know. So hopefully we can evolve to a place where we can start accepting this because they taste pretty amazing. That being said, you know, I love this time. It's going by too quickly. I could talk to you all day, but I want to make sure that you and I talk to our audience about number one, what's next for you? You've got so much on your plate. You're doing so many amazing things. Share with our audience that what are you doing right now? What's your passion project right now?
Right. Well, I think, you know, I mean, a couple of things. Obviously, the Viva Abejas, the cohort program, you know, things I'm working on.
Hmm.
You know, right now we have a big campaign, you know, Day of the Dead, you know, Dia de los
Oh yeah,
Muertos,
yeah,
which many people don't know
yeah,
about, but you know, I'll just
yeah.
explain briefly where it is. In Mexico, you know, November 2nd is the Day of the Dead. And, you know, what happens in Mexico is, you know, we all forget about our loved ones that are no longer with us,
Hmm.
that have passed on, right? And so every year in Mexico for the Day of the Dead, we bring back our loved ones, right? Bring back to, you know, so we do these ofrendas or these altars where we put their pictures. The whole family gets together. We talk about them. You know, we eat what they used to like to eat. So it's about, you know, remembering, you know, whether it's our parents or siblings that are no longer with us. It's a time of remembrance. So we do a big campaign all around the world in our restaurant. We build the ofrendas, and it's about all about remembering our, you know, our loved ones that are no longer with us. So I think that's a great tradition. You know, especially
Yeah.
during Hispanic months. So I think, you know, as a people, I think it's important to show some of our culture, you know, cultural things that we do. So
Hmm.
I'm doing that. So you can go to any of our restaurants and have this special menu that I create every year for, you know, for
Oh, that's
that.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's, you know, that's on top of mine right now. I have a couple new openings. I'm opening a new restaurant in Houston called De Leña,
Oh,
which is a wood burning kitchen. You know,
nice.
one thing that excites me a lot, and I spoke to you a little bit about it, you know, to kind of pick your brain, because you know, I'm a chef, I'm a restaurateur. I'm, you know, not a TV guy, I'm not a movie guy, whatever.
Well, you're
Um,
quickly becoming one, I can tell you
no.
that. So it's all good. Yeah.
Thank you. But you know, I want to do this program. I want to do a podcast because the restaurant industry is very, very challenging, right? And
Yeah.
everybody loves food and everybody wants to get into it. It's I don't know how many billion or trillions. But unfortunately, as you said earlier, you know, a lot of people lose a lot of money in the restaurant industry
Yeah.
because they don't know the whys or the hows, right? The planning. So I want to start, you know, some kind of a mentorship program where I can give people these tools, right? If you want to open a restaurant, you know, you know, you can go in this and understand, you know, what it takes to do a restaurant, you know, how much, you know, money typically would take, you know. So, you know, whether it's my finance department, my social media department, my culinary department, you know, have all
Yeah.
these tools for people that, you know, because restaurant business is not going away, right? That we have to eat. So, you
Yes.
know, to help people really survive and, you know, get into it and you know, at least give them a, you know, a 50-50 chance of surviving, not a 20% of survival. So I'm very, you know, very excited about doing this, putting all the materials together and, you know, helping people understand. And if you want to do the restaurant business, you know, how do you go about it, you know, and help you, you know, lose money. So yeah, so those are some of the bigger things that I'm working on right now.
No, I love the idea that you're giving back in so many ways with the conservation with the bees, with this passion project about your kids, and then this podcast idea of yours, which is I think it's fantastic. I think it's got a lot of legs and people need to hear it. Where can people find you if they want to look you up? What's the best site for them to go to?
I think if they go into www dot, I think it's wait, I'm not, I think it's rshage.com or Richard Sandoval
Okay.
Hospitality. If they Google that, Richard Sandoval Hospitality, that'll take
Yeah.
them right into you know our website, and they can find out, you know, more about the company, you know, more about what I'm
Okay.
doing, you know, where we have restaurants, you know, what locations are doing what. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we're going to put that with the finished podcast. We're going to put that on the lower third so people can see the graphics and click on it. So they'll be able to jump right to it. And we'll add it to the website for the show because we want people to really get to
Great.
know you a little bit better as well. So last but not least, you've got restaurants everywhere in the world. So I know you've got some in Tampa, in my neck of the woods. You're opening
Right.
one in Houston now. So what other countries do you have restaurants in?
All right. That's a very good question. That's almost like a trick question. So let's start in North America. So, going down from the east to the west, I have New York, I have Washington, Virginia, then I have Miami, Texas, Nashville, uh, Tennessee, California. So yeah, we pretty much all the way down to to the West Coast. Then outside the
Okay.
U.S., we have in Mexico, we have in Punta Mita, we have in Riviera Maya, which is Cancun.
Yeah.
Then we have in Europe, we have in Greece, we have in Istanbul, we have in Serbia,
Oh, wow.
and then we have in Malta, and then you go to the Middle East, we have Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Qatar.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So, okay. So I was going to finish the podcast, but like I said, I could keep talking to you. But one last question is, how do you pick a place to put a restaurant in? How do you make that decision?
I mean, I always laugh and they say, well, they pick me, right?
There you go. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Because when I started my business, I didn't have any money, and people asked, "Well, how did you end up everywhere?" I said, "Well, I had no money, so I had to go where people came to offer me, space or financing."
Yeah.
And so it's
Yeah.
so organically, people would come to me and ask me, we've been to your restaurant in New York. Would you open one in Dubai? And I said, well, let me go to Dubai and let me understand what's happening in Dubai. And yeah, we can talk about it. So yeah, mostly, luckily I've never had to go after business. It's always kind of come to me because of our reputation, our style of cuisine. Luckily, like I'm in a very cool, type of cuisine, which is Mexican, Latin, which is, to me, it's one of the greatest
Yeah.
cuisines in the world. Like India, there's so many flavors, it's so regional,
Yeah.
ingredients. I mean, you could dive into this for years and not touch the surface of it. So yeah, so most people come to me and ask me, and Latin food is growing around the world, and so yeah, so I'm very lucky, and hopefully my children can continue carrying the torch, to other countries and different places.
Well, listen, from one father to another, I can see the passion that your son has and the legacy you built, and I hope to do the same thing for my own kids. So I think you've done it right. So my hat's off to you on that for sure.
That's awesome. Thank
But
you.
yeah, absolutely. But all right, folks, we could keep talking forever, but check out this episode of our podcast, Recipe for Wellness, based on our TV show. And we will catch Chef Sandoval in episode 6 of season 2, which is going to air next year. It's right around the corner, which is amazing. And we actually are going to be on a number of different platforms, not just PBS. So we're expanding, we're growing. We can't wait to share it with the world. And we're glad you're growing with us as well. So thank you again for your time. Safe travels to you. You and I are going to connect no matter what happens. And our audience, thanks you for your time. And we'll see you again down the road.
Thank you.
Absolutely.